The squad car's siren screamed, slicing through the humid Atlanta evening like a blade. Aaliyah Carter, barely 16, sprinted down the alley, her sneakers pounding against the cracked pavement, her breath ragged. She wasn't running from guilt, she was running from the weight of a world that saw her skin before her soul. The officer's shout echoed behind her, "Stop, now." His voice was sharp, laced with the kind of authority that didn't ask questions. Aaliyah's heart thundered, not because she'd done anything wrong, but because she knew how this looked. Black girl, hoodie, running at dusk. She'd seen the news, heard the stories. She wasn't naive. But she wasn't a criminal either. Her backpack, heavy with law books and case files, bounced against her spine, a reminder of the truth she carried. She was a legal intern, a prodigy who'd aced mock trials and memorized statutes by 13. Yet here, in this alley, she was just another suspect. She skidded to a stop, cornered by a chain-link fence, her hands shooting up instinctively. "I didn't do anything," she yelled, her voice cracking with a mix of anger and desperation. The officer, a broad-shouldered man named Officer Daniel Holt, closed in, his flashlight blinding her. His jaw was set, eyes narrowed, already painting her as the thief reported in the area. "Hands on the wall, now," he barked, his tone leaving no room for argument. Aaliyah complied, her palms pressing against the rough brick, her mind racing. She'd studied cases like this: racial profiling, unlawful detainment, but living it was different. It was suffocating. The alley wasn't empty. A small crowd had gathered at its mouth: shopkeepers, passers-by, a few teens recording on their phones. Whispers rippled through them. "Another one," someone muttered. "They always target us." Aaliyah's cheeks burned with humiliation, but she forced herself to stay calm. She knew her rights. She'd memorized them before she could drive. "Officer, I'm not who you think," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Check my bag. I'm an intern at Carter and Wells. I'm not a thief." Holt scoffed, his grip tightening as he patted her down. "Yeah, sure, kid. Save it for the station." He unzipped her backpack, expecting drugs or stolen goods. Instead, out tumbled a worn copy of constitutional law, a legal pad scrawled with notes, and a laminated ID badge from the prestigious law firm downtown. He froze, his hand hovering over the badge. Aaliyah Carter, legal intern. The photo matched her face, same sharp eyes, same determined jaw. His certainty cracked. "What's this?" he muttered, more to himself than her. Aaliyah seized the moment. "That's proof I'm not your suspect. I was at the library, studying for a case. Check the timestamp on my library card if you don't believe me." Her voice was firm now, cutting through the tension like a gavel. Holt's face twitched, caught between suspicion and doubt. The crowd grew louder, their murmurs turning to accusations. "Let her go," a woman shouted. "You got the wrong kid." Holt's radio crackled, dispatch confirming the suspect description: male, mid-20s, red jacket. Aaliyah wore a gray hoodie. His mistake was glaring, but he didn't release her. Not yet. Pride, or maybe fear of admitting fault, kept his hand on her arm. "This doesn't add up," he said, his tone softer but still defensive. "Why were you running?" "Because I saw you chasing me." Aaliyah snapped, her frustration boiling over. "You think I don't know what happens to people like me? I ran because I was scared, not because I'm guilty." Her words hung in the air, raw and unapologetic. The crowd's anger swelled, phones still recording, capturing every second of the standoff. Holt's partner, Officer Reyes, arrived, sensing the escalating tension. "Dan, ease up," Reyes said quietly. "She's not our guy." But Holt wasn't ready to back down. He'd been on the force 15 years, seen every excuse, every lie. Yet something about Aaliyah's eyes, fear mixed with unshakable resolve, gnawed at him. He'd seen that look before, in courtrooms, on witnesses who knew more than they let on. "You're telling me you're some kind of lawyer?" he asked, half skeptical, half curious. "Not yet," Aaliyah said, her voice steady as steel. "But I will be. And I know my rights. You have no probable cause to hold me." Her words weren't just defiance, they were a challenge, rooted in hours spent poring over law books, fueled by a dream to change a system that too often failed people like her. Holt's grip loosened, but his pride held firm. The crowd pressed closer, their voices a chorus of outrage and support. "She's a kid, man," a man yelled. "Let her go." The air crackled with tension, every second stretching like a taut wire. Aaliyah's mind raced, calculating her next move. She could recite the Fourth Amendment verbatim, but would it matter here? Holt's radio crackled again, dispatch urging him to stand down. The real suspect had been spotted 2 blocks away. The truth was undeniable now, but Holt's hesitation lingered, a silent battle between duty and ego. Reyes stepped forward, placing a hand on Holt's shoulder. "Dan, it's over. Let her go." Holt's jaw clenched, but he finally released Aaliyah, stepping back as if burned. She stumbled slightly, catching herself against the wall, her breath shaky but her gaze unbroken. The crowd erupted in cheers, some clapping, others still filming, their voices a mix of relief and defiance. Aaliyah straightened, brushing off her hoodie, her dignity intact despite the ordeal. "I'm sorry," Holt muttered, barely audible, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. Aaliyah didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke louder than words, an indictment of a system that had judged her before knowing her. She picked up her books, her ID badge glinting in the fading light, and walked toward the crowd. They parted for her, some offering nods of respect, others whispering words of encouragement. She was no longer just a girl in a hoodie. She was Aaliyah Carter, the prodigy who'd faced down injustice and walked away unbroken. But the story didn't end there. Aaliyah's encounter with Holt was just the spark. The video of her detainment spread like wildfire online, igniting debates across the city. Some called her a hero, a symbol of resistance against profiling. Others, clinging to stereotypes, questioned her story, her credentials, her very existence. The law firm where she interned, Carter and Wells, took notice. Her supervisor, Ms. Evelyn Wells, a fierce black attorney who'd fought her own battles, saw the footage and called Aaliyah into her office the next day. "You didn't just survive that, Aaliyah," Evelyn said, her voice warm but firm. "You turned it into a moment. That's what makes you dangerous to them." She slid a folder across her desk, a high-profile case involving a wrongful arrest, eerily similar to Aaliyah's experience. "You're not just an intern anymore. You're on this case. Show them who you are." Aaliyah's hands trembled as she opened the folder, her eyes scanning the details. This wasn't just a case, it was a chance to fight back, to use the law as her weapon. But the weight of it was heavy. The client, a young black man named Jamal, had been framed for a crime he didn't commit, his life unraveling under the same assumptions that had pinned Aaliyah against that alley wall. She saw herself in him, and it fueled her. Meanwhile, Holt couldn't shake the encounter. Back at the precinct, the video haunted him. Colleagues slapped his back, saying he'd just done his job, but the words felt hollow. He'd seen Aaliyah's badge, her books, her truth, and he'd still doubted her. Why? The question gnawed at him, forcing him to confront the biases he'd never admitted to himself. He wasn't a bad cop, he told himself. He'd followed protocol. But protocol hadn't seen Aaliyah's humanity, only her skin. Days later, Aaliyah stood in a courtroom, her notes meticulously prepared, her voice steady as she presented evidence for Jamal's case. The judge, a stern woman with a reputation for fairness, listened intently. Aaliyah's arguments were sharp, her passion undeniable. She wasn't just fighting for Jamal, she was fighting for every kid who'd been misjudged, every life dismissed by a glance. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with anticipation. Outside, protesters held signs with Aaliyah's name, her story now a rallying cry. Holt was there too, in the back, off-duty and unnoticed. He'd come to see her, to understand the girl he'd almost broken. As Aaliyah spoke, her words cutting through the room with precision and fire, he felt something shift. Shame, maybe. Or respect. He didn't know yet. But he stayed until the end, watching as the judge ruled in Jamal's favor, the courtroom erupting in applause. Aaliyah's eyes met his for a fleeting moment, and in that glance, he saw no anger only strength. Aaliyah's victory in Jamal's case wasn't just a win for one man, it was a spark that lit up Atlanta. Her name spread beyond the courtroom, her face now a symbol of defiance and brilliance. Social media buzzed with hashtags, Justice for Aaliyah, Black Excellence. The video of her alleyway standoff with Officer Holt looped endlessly online, each view fueling debates about race, power, and the law. For Aaliyah, though, the spotlight was a double-edged sword. She wanted to be seen for her mind, not her moment of pain, but the world wasn't ready to let that moment fade. At Carter & Wells, Aaliyah threw herself into her work. The firm had assigned her more cases, trusting her to handle research and even assist in court. Evelyn Wells became her mentor, guiding her through the labyrinth of legal strategy while reminding her to stay grounded. "You're not just fighting for clients," Evelyn said one evening, her eyes sharp with purpose. "You're fighting for the ones who don't have a voice. Never forget that." Aaliyah nodded, her resolve hardening. She spent late nights in the firm's library, her desk buried under case law and sticky notes, driven by a fire to prove herself not just to the world, but to the part of her that still felt the sting of Holt's grip in that alley. Meanwhile, Officer Daniel Holt couldn't escape the shadow of that night. The precinct was a mixed bag. Some colleagues defended him, insisting he'd followed protocol, while others whispered that he'd messed up. His captain pulled him aside, warning him about the public backlash. "You're a good cop, Dan, but this ain't going away," she said. "Figure out how to make it right." Holt didn't know what right meant. He'd been trained to act fast, to trust his instincts, but those instincts had failed him. Aaliyah's face haunted his dreams, not the scared girl in the alley, but the one in the courtroom, her voice commanding respect. He started watching her interviews online, reading about her work. She was 16, yet she carried herself like someone who'd seen the world's flaws and decided to fix them. One evening, Holt sat at his kitchen table, scrolling through comments under the viral video. Some called him a racist, others a victim of a broken system. He wanted to dismiss the hate, but one comment stuck: he didn't see her. He saw a stereotype. It hit like a punch. Holt wasn't a monster, never raised his voice to his kids, never thrown a punch in anger, but he judged Aaliyah before knowing her. That truth gnawed at him, forcing him to question the lens through which he'd viewed every suspect, every call. Aaliyah's next big case came 6 months later, a class action lawsuit against the city, alleging systemic racial profiling by the police department. The case was a beast: hundreds of plaintiffs, years of data, and a city council desperate to bury it. Aaliyah wasn't lead counsel, but Evelyn trusted her to draft key arguments, a role unheard of for an intern. The stakes were enormous. If they won, it could force reforms, change policies, save lives. If they lost, it would silence the voices of countless Jamals, Aaliyahs, and others who'd been profiled. She felt the weight of it every day, her dreams filled with faces from the alley crowd, their eyes pleading for justice. The case brought her back into Holt's orbit. He'd been called as a witness, his detainment of Aaliyah cited as evidence of the department's patterns. The irony wasn't lost on her. She didn't want revenge, she wanted accountability. When Holt took the stand, their eyes met again, just as they had in Jamal's hearing. This time, though, Holt looked different. His shoulders were slumped, his face lined with something heavier than fatigue. Regret, maybe. Aaliyah couldn't tell. She focused on her notes, her pen moving furiously as she prepared cross-examination questions. Holt's testimony was raw. He admitted to detaining Aaliyah without clear cause, his voice low but steady. "I saw a suspect running, and I acted," he said. "I didn't know who she was. I should have checked. The courtroom was silent, the air thick with tension. Aaliyah's heart raced not from fear, but from the surreal weight of hearing him own his mistake. The plaintiff's lead attorney, a sharp-eyed man named Mr. Dawson, pressed harder. Officer Holt, how many times have you acted on instinct and detained someone who looked like Ms. Carter? Holt hesitated, his jaw tight. Too many, he finally said, the words barely audible but heavy as stone. The admission sent ripples through the room. Reporters scribbled furiously, the plaintiffs exchanged glances. Aaliyah felt a strange mix of vindication and unease. Holt wasn't the villain she'd imagined, and the Allay was human, flawed, caught in a system that shaped his instincts as much as it had shaped her fears. She leaned toward Evelyn, whispering, "He's not lying." "That's something." Evelyn nodded, her expression unreadable. "It's a start, Aaliyah. But it's not enough." Outside the courtroom, the city was a powder keg. Protests swelled, some demanding Holt's badge, others calling for broader reforms. Aaliyah avoided the crowds, but she couldn't escape the noise. Her phone buzzed with messages, support from strangers, hate from trolls, requests for interviews. She ignored them all, focusing on the case. Late one night, as she reviewed evidence in the firm's empty conference room, Evelyn dropped a bombshell. "The city's offering a settlement," she said. "Big money, but no policy changes. We need to decide, fight or settle." Aaliyah's stomach twisted. Money would help the plaintiffs, but it wouldn't fix the system. "We fight," she said without hesitation. "If we settle, nothing changes. The next kid in an alley won't have a badge or a law firm." Evelyn smiled, a rare flicker of pride. "That's why I keep you around, kid." The trial stretched on, each day a battle of wits and wills. Aaliyah's arguments grew sharper, her presence in the courtroom undeniable. She wasn't just an intern now, she was a force, her voice carrying the weight of her community's pain and her own resilience. Holt watched from the gallery, attending every session he could. He didn't speak to her, didn't approach, but his presence was a quiet acknowledgement of her power. He was learning, slowly, what it meant to see people, not profiles. The turning point came when Aaliyah took the stand. She recounted the alley incident, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "I wasn't a suspect that night, I was a target," she said, her eyes sweeping the room. "I was 16, carrying law books, dreaming of justice. But to Officer Holt, I was just a black kid running. That's what this case is about, not one mistake, but a system that makes those mistakes feel right." The jury leaned forward, hanging on her words. Holt, in the back, stared at his hands, her truth cutting deeper than any cross-examination. The verdict came after 3 grueling weeks. The jury ruled in favor of the plaintiffs, ordering sweeping reforms, mandatory bias training, stricter oversight, body cams for every officer. The courtroom erupted, cheers mingling with sobs. Aaliyah hugged Evelyn, tears stinging her eyes. It wasn't just a win, it was a step toward a world where no one else would feel the cold brick of an alley wall under false suspicion. Holt approached her outside the courthouse, the first time they'd spoken since that night. The crowd had thinned, leaving them in a quiet corner of the steps. "Ms. Carter," he said, his voice rough. "I was wrong. I didn't see you." Aaliyah studied him, searching for sincerity. She found it in his eyes, tired but clear. "You see me now," she said, not unkindly. "That's where it starts." She walked away, her head high, leaving Holt to wrestle with his own path forward. Months later, Aaliyah stood at a community forum, sharing her story to a packed room. She spoke of the alley, the case, and the hope that change was possible. Holt was there, off-duty, listening. He'd started volunteering at a youth center, mentoring kids who reminded him of all the Yakid's the system too often failed. It wasn't redemption, not fully, but it was a beginning. Aaliyah caught his eye and nodded, a small gesture of acknowledgement. They weren't friends, but they were no longer enemies. The city was still divided. Some saw the reforms as progress, others as insufficient. Aaliyah knew the fight was far from over, but she also knew her place in it. She was no longer just the girl in the alley. She was Aaliyah Carter, legal prodigy, voice of a generation, proof that justice could rise from pain. As she stepped off the stage, the crowd's applause echoed, a reminder that her story wasn't just hers, it was theirs. What's right, what's wrong, what's just? Share your voice, because every perspective shapes the fight for a better tomorrow.